This is a tutorial for administrators of Opendium's Iceni online safety systems. The Iceni uses a hierarchical grouping system which allows easy configuration of high-level settings that apply to everyone, and then refine them for individual groups or even apply a setting to just a specific user or workstation. In this video we are seeing how to figure out which settings are being used in any given situation. We are interested in a user with the username 105567, and if we go to the Users and Groups page, we can see that this user is in the Intake 10 group. We can go to the Web Proxy page and then filter categories and see which types of websites are blocked for the Intake 10 group. In some cases, the settings may be set to automatically change depending on the time of day, and we can see that this is the case for the social networking category. It is set to be blocked any time except weekends, and if we click on the plus sign next to the category, there is a calendar on the right showing when the category is blocked. Rather than manually having to set the blocked categories on each group, we can see that all of these settings are being inherited from the parent sixth form group. The sixth form group is also set to inherit its settings from its parent, the students group, and the blocked categories are all configured in the students group. It is a good idea to set up some light filtering in the root everyone group and then override it in the subgroups where necessary. But by examining the settings in this way, we have only considered the configuration based on the user's group. However, configuration can also be determined based on which workstation the user is using. The easiest way to find out which settings apply to a specific situation is by using the Policy Modeling report. To access this report directly, go to Reports and then Web Proxy. Select Policy Modeling from the menu on the left. For a complete report, we need to enter both the username and the IP address of the workstation that the user is using. The report shows a summary of which settings the web proxy will use for this user. The first part of the report summarizes whether the proxy should identify the user. In most situations, user identification will be enabled, and the proxy will either authenticate the user itself or rely on an external system to do so, such as your Wi-Fi controller. The overrides which affect authentication are also shown here. The first two overrides are a standard part of Iceni and disable authentication for certain web addresses. We recommend that these overrides are always enabled, as they are designed to work around problems with buggy third-party apps. The third override in the list is a custom user-defined override that also disables authentication for certain websites. The next section of the report summarizes the settings that will normally be used. We can see that the categories of website that will be blocked are listed here, together with the status of the walled garden, which overrides will be used, permissions, and the safe search settings. In the final section of the report, we can see the settings that will apply if the user couldn't be identified. For example, if one of the overrides listed in the user identification section disables authentication for a website, these settings may be used when accessing that website. If none of the configuration changes depending on the time of day, the times column won't be displayed. However, if you remember, the social networking category was set to be blocked except at weekends. At the moment, we're looking at the settings that will be used during the week, and we can see that the social networking category is set to be blocked. However, if I choose a weekend from the times column, the social networking filter is shown as disabled. The summary is very useful to quickly verify that the right settings are being applied, but sometimes you need to understand exactly why those settings have been chosen. Each setting in the summary has a plus sign next to it to provide more detailed information. For example, the Permissions and Limits section shows that HTTPS interception is disabled. Clicking the plus sign draws a graph which visualizes the inheritance tree used to determine the HTTPS interception setting. The grayed out sections show settings which weren't used, so we can see that the Everyone group enables active HTTPS interception, and that this was inherited by the Students group, and by each of its descendant groups, and finally the user itself. But in the end, none of this configuration was used. The group shown in green is where the configuration that was used originates. The green group, called No HTTPS Interception, disables HTTPS interception, and this is inherited by the 10.5.24.1/32 network, which contains the user's workstation. The final result was to disable HTTPS interception. The graph shows that the HTTPS interception permission was set in two places, first in the Everyone group, and then in the No HTTPS interception group. The setting that is furthest from the root of the tree is always the one which will be used. The policy modeling report can also be accessed from the logs, images, and disabled user reports. Clicking a thumbnail in this images report brings up a details box. Clicking the View Policy Modeling Report button opens a new tab with a report based on the user and IP address which made the original request. The time that the request happened will be pre-selected, but remember that the policy modeling report is based on the current configuration rather than the configuration that was in effect when the web request was originally made. I hope this video has been useful. If you have any questions, you can email support@opendium.com or call our usual support number. You can subscribe to our Twitter feed at twitter.com/opendium to get notifications of new tutorials and general information about Opendium, or visit our website at opendium.com.